Please take your seats. I know my voice is loud on its own. Spinning or something. You know?
Yeah, slowly rotate.
Yeah, right.
They do that. They do that
kind
in
of
Houston
a
Rodeo.
sound effect.
Performers in a so the
Please
performer
join us.
rotates.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
For the first roundtable of the Resilient Cities Expo. Very happy to have this organized by the Expo organization. I'm Aris Papadopoulos. I'll be the moderator. Just a few words about me. I'm the chair of the nonprofit Resilience Action Fund and also a resilience expert at FIU. But beside that, I'm an engineer. I'm a construction industry veteran, I call myself. And also I'm a World Trade Center 9/11 survivor, which got me kind of started in this direction here. So I'd like to welcome our 4 distinguished panel or participant members here, starting and we'll be speaking in this sequence here with Tom Hoban, the president of Kitson and Partners, who are the developers of Babcock Ranch, who, if you haven't heard about it, you will learn today about how great a development they've made, followed by Patrick Murphy, who is the managing director of a innovative Contech, I call it, construction technology company called Renco, but also is a second-generation principal of Coastal Construction, a very well-known construction company here in Florida. Followed by Rives Taylor, architect and a principal at Gensler, one of the world's largest, if not the largest, architecture and design firms, and who also directs the Resilience Research Institute or Center, or Institute, part of the center, from Houston, where he's based, and very happy to have him here. And finally, Andy Kruger, who is CEO of BuildSos, what I call a resilience, maybe infotech kind of company, and is also on the board of a grassroots organization called Smart Home America that deserves to be mentioned, and he'll say a few words about that. A lot of what we'll be talking about today deals with buildings and the built environment, and we know we all need a home, we all need a place to work, we all need transportation, buildings, and even warehouses to store things, so buildings are an important part of our life. I like to say that sustainability is a coin with 2 sides. On one side, you have energy efficiency and environmental footprint, and that's what I call green. The other side of that coin is long-lasting, resisting the hazards, and also continuity of operations, and that's resilience. And to be really sustainable, you need both. So we're going to touch on some green things, but I really hope we can focus on that resilience side of the coin. Because if you have to build it twice, it's neither green nor sustainable. So let's start with you, Tom. Tell us a bit more about yourself and also about the Kitson Partners Babcock Ranch.
Sure. Thank you, Aris. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you. Great to be here. Look forward to the conversation today. Kitson and Partners, we're a real estate development company headquartered in South Florida, and we've been in the master plan community development space for over 30 years, building communities across mostly Florida, in the Northeast, originally back in the early 90s, but in Florida since the mid-2000s. And I think the big topic for us here today, from Kitson and Partners' perspective, is Babcock Ranch. Aris alluded to it. We bought Babcock Ranch back in 2006, and we bought 91,000 acres of land in Southwest Florida, basically in North Fort Myers, kind of Punta Gorda marketplace. And as part of that purchase, we sold 73,000 acres to the state of Florida for permanent preservation. So we bought 91,000, we sold 73,000 acres, and kept 18,000 acres for development. That 18,000 acres we kept got entitlements for about 22,000 homes and 6 million square feet of commercial space. So we're endeavoring to build a new town in Southwest Florida. It's very large. It'll be home to 60,000 people when we're done. We broke ground back in 2015, so we just crossed over a 10-year groundbreaking back in November of last year. Got about 15,000 people living at Babcock today, so we're well on our way, but we got a long way to go. And part of this initiative for us back 20 years ago in 2006 was how do we do a project of this size and scale and embrace nature and make sure that nature and development can coexist and work hand in hand in harmony. And part of that's what Aris spoke about. Part of it was a very sustainability-driven approach. Part of sustainability is resilience. you've simplified it into a two-sided coin. It's like a Rubik's Cube to us. It's very complicated. And if you ask somebody what does sustainability mean, you get a whole bunch of different answers, from education to healthcare to environmental leadership and to resilience, et cetera. So it's a very complex question. And if you could suspend yourselves to go back 20 years ago, no one was really talking about sustainability back in 2005, 2006. So we were a bit kind of looking at us sideways about this. The term ESG didn't exist back in 2005, 2006. So the world's kind of moved that way, thankfully. And we're very proud that we really embraced this innovative approach to development and looked at it as a tremendous responsibility and an obligation to do it the right way, given the size and scale of what we were doing. This wasn't going to be a 5-year project with 500 people living in it. This was going to be a 25-year project with 60,000 people living in it, with a huge region surrounding us that we would have impacts on if we didn't do it properly. So this sustainability theme has been really kind of on our scorecard from the very beginning back in 2005, 2006. We were able to bring in Florida Power and Light. I'm not sure if slides are supposed to be scrolling or not, but we brought in Florida Power and Light as a partner early on. There's a picture of Babcock. You can see that portion to the right, that's the 91,000 acres. You can see the 18,000 acres in between the green areas. So that area to the right is the 91,000 acre ranch we bought originally. The green area around it's 73,000 acres we sold to the state in Toledo County. Across the street on the left side of the page, the Babcock family had gifted that land to the state of Florida back in the 50s and 60s. So we're truly surrounded by about 150,000 acres of nature and preserve. So with that comes a tremendous responsibility to make sure you're not impacting your neighbors in a negative way. So that's been a very big part of our story. If you can keep scrolling as I talk. Florida Power and Light agreed to come in 2009 and create a solar farm on Babcock Ranch to power the town. So we got billed as the first solar powered town in the world. We worked on 440 acres of land, and Florida Power and Light built this solar photovoltaic facility on Babcock. It was a very big success for them, which led to a second phase of this solar. So there's about 150 megawatts of solar PV on Babcock Ranch. At build out, we will be a net producer of energy, so we consume less than we produce, even at build out 15 years from now. It's on about 900 acres of land. It's over 700,000 panels of solar. So it's a very big part of our story. Renewable energy, sustainability kind of go hand in hand for us. Keep scrolling. What we did here, back to this nature and embracing nature and making nature and development coexist in harmony. We went back and we looked at the maps of Babcock Ranch in the 1940s to figure out how did the water flow across the property? How did the sheet flow work at Babcock Ranch? And as developers, we tend, as a broad brush for developers, we tend to really want to develop every square inch of land that we own to get the value out of the land. We did it a bit differently back in 05 and 06 and said, let's really try to avoid stay out of those areas. Let's embrace nature. Let's not fight Mother Nature. Let's see where this water flowed. Maybe we shouldn't develop in those areas, right? Maybe we should stay out of those areas. So on the 18,000 acres of land we bought, we ended up preserving 9,000 of those acres of land. So 50% of what we bought, we ended up preserving. So in totality, 91,000 acres of land in preservation. We're only developing on 10% of the property. What you see here are some of the wetlands, some of those flowways on Babcock Ranch. We kept our wetlands. And they're beautiful from an amenity perspective, but they're also incredibly important as part of our resilience story. The storage, you can just see it there, the storage of water in these wetlands that permeate throughout Babcock Ranch is tremendous. So from a wind perspective, we've got great building codes. From a water management perspective, we at Babcock have a tremendous water management story, which we'll talk about as we keep going. I'll keep this brief, I know we've got to keep rolling. But you can see there, that's more of that natural landscape. We did not choose to develop in those areas. As a result, you can keep rolling through these guys and the slides pretty quick to get through it so we can pass the baton over to Patrick. We were tested in 2002 with Hurricane Ian, and that was kind of the big litmus test. We've been planning and designing and engineering Babcock Ranch for 10 years, and we had some storms blow through, but nothing like Hurricane Ian that hit in Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, made its way across the state, sat on top of Babcock Ranch. You can see the yellow star there in the map for 8 hours and pounded us with rain, 100-mile-an-hour winds.
Let me ask you to wrap up so we can ask you some questions.
So it was a huge success. The region obviously was devastated and tragic for our region. For this specific project, Babcock Ranch, if you keep clicking one more slide, I think it's my last slide. We emerged from that storm still standing. We never lost power. We never flooded. We didn't have to go on a boil water notice with our utility. Our Wi-Fi never went out. We had very limited damage, surrounded by chaos and tragedy in the region. So we ended up getting a lot of good recognition publicly. 60 Minutes CNN, others, and kind of citing what happened at Babcock Ranch, which really kind of put us on the map from a market perspective. And we saw a lot of demand come in. You talk about resiliency, you talk about innovation, and typically it comes at a cost, an upfront cost. And there's a lot of debate among partners and capital. How do you justify those costs? What's the ROI on those costs? If you look at this page, I'm not sure how to quantify it and what this did for Babcock Ranch from an acceptance perspective in the marketplace, the demand that showed up because we built a safer place, a more resilient place.
Let me ask you a question, Tom.
Yeah.
And you know, Babcock Ranch received one of the 7 million awards
Yeah.
in 2024, and also Sid Kitson is on the first documentary that I made, Built to Last with a question mark. But you're a business guy, and we know that most residential developers are looking at a 3-year time frame.
Yeah.
They see resilience as a cost,
Yep.
and they're trying to maximize the ROI. How do you convince a developer that resilience is a profitable business strategy?
That's a great question, and I think you hit a really important point. It's very difficult to do that when you think in short-term windows. So if you're thinking in a 2 or 3 year window, it's really hard to justify or rationalize maybe incremental spending. If you can think a longer term, about 10, 15, 20-year windows, you can get much more wrapped around it and get some more value out of that investment. So it's a challenge. I think most developers aren't working on major long-term projects. They're kind of in that 3, 5, 7 year range. That said, I think with the right capital partners that appreciate, depending upon where you are, whether you're in California with wildfires or flood zones, in South Florida, these storms aren't stopping, right? They're coming. Whether I'm not debating climate change, there's just storm activity's up, sea levels are up, and the storm activity is more robust and more severe when it comes. If you're not planning for that, one storm could wipe out your entire financial pro forma if you haven't planned for it properly on day one. So there is an ROI. It's hard to underwrite. It's hard to quantify it, but it's a real analysis you can do with your partners. It's difficult, but you can do it.
Okay.
Ask any question.
Yeah, just a quick question. So I think one of the things that's fascinating about what you're saying is you have multi-decade development, right?
Yeah.
And you have multi-decade ROI. So if you look at the technologies here today, a lot of these weren't around
Yep.
in 2006. So when you go to make the ROI pitch, do you factor in the fact that you don't know the technology that's going to exist when the project's complete? And I guess the corollary question to that is Babcock Ranch going to be a physical record of changing technologies in the space, right? By the time you're done with it, are you going to be able to look from the first home through to the last home and say, look what we did in the last one versus the first?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the answer is absolutely. If we don't do that, we've failed. If we're looking at 2006 and 2036, and we're saying, look at Babcock, it looks the same, we failed. Right? It's a very innovative approach. It iterates quickly. It's iterating more quickly than it's ever had before in terms of rapid pace of change, rate of change. So to that point, I'll stop. I know I'm hogging the mic here, sorry guys, but we have an innovation neighborhood we're actually pursuing right now at Babcock Ranch. It's 25 acres, 250 to 350 homes. We're working with our builders on the product type, which is innovative, how they build it, the building systems, and then let's call that the hardware, the software around it, which is how do I live? Insurance, transportation, health and wellness. So how do we merge that hardware, software innovation to make that quality of life superior to the neighborhood that was built prior?
Okay, fascinating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next presenter.
Thank you.
Patrick, tell us about yourself and about Renco.
Thank you, and I love the comments. It's definitely the community of the future that you're building, so congrats. So Patrick Murphy, first slide on Renco here. So I was raised in a family construction business called Coastal Construction. We're based here in Miami. We've been blessed to become the largest general contractor in Florida, do a lot of vertical, high-rise, multifamily, and commercial construction. And in 2010, we were introduced to this company called Renco, which stands for Renewable Composites. And the best thing to do is start by looking at this screen, and we have a block we're going to pass around here in a second. But imagine a Lego block for adults. However, this block is made of recycled glass, recycled plastic, calcite, which is like a limestone dust, and then a resin that holds it all together. And it turns out that this block is basically stronger, lighter, faster, greener, and less expensive than traditional building materials. And if you zoom out for a second, and you think about one of the sort of fundamental problems with resiliency, is we haven't changed. We've been using the same 3 building types for 100 plus years: concrete, metal, and wood, right? And nothing's changed. And they're not good for the environment, right? There's all sorts of studies out there, concrete and steel being some of the worst. So this material, made of recycled materials primarily, very durable. Next slide, please. One of the interesting things that I think is worth noting, and maybe we're going to get to this, Aris, is what it takes to get a new building material approved in the US. We were introduced to this in 2010. We had seen buildings in Turkey, 5, 6, 7-story buildings that were built using this material in Turkey. So we said, gosh, it clearly works, the proof's in the pudding. Let's bring it to the US. We know people, we're local builder here, we're gonna get this approved. Well, it ended up taking over 10 years to get all of the approvals necessary to build with this because it's the 4th building system ever approved in the US. And whatever the new idea is, there's a lot of great composites, there's a lot of great new materials coming to the market. We, as leaders, have to find a way to help them get approved faster because the amount of time and the amount of money that it takes, a lot of great ideas are dying on the vine. So we are lucky enough to have some great supporters and investors that were willing to stick with this and got our first building built here in Palm Beach, Florida. Category 5 hurricane approved. We have all the necessary approvals to build in about 98% of the United States right now. South Florida Building Code, the California seismic codes, your fire, off-gassing, all the various codes. And so our first building was a 96-unit apartment here. Next slide, please, in Palm Beach. This is the starting block. So you pour a concrete slab and you put this starter kit down. Next slide, the starter block. That's a sort of a finished unit there. That's a real picture, not a rendering, both of those. One of the advantages of this material is you can make it look like anything you want. It could be a 5-star, 4 Seasons, or it could be a Motel 8, right? You can finish it with marble, you can finish it with stucco, wood, whatever you want. We are just the bones of the building. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Well, there were 8 others, but that's all right. So I'll just say a couple more quick things about Renco.
Where are you going from here?
Well, we originally had a factory in Turkey, which made a lot of sense. 250,000 square foot factory. We were building the blocks, shipping it over. And that made a lot of sense. Shipping was inexpensive. It was easy to do. You could count on it. It was reliable. COVID, Suez Canal, tariffs, can't rely on that. So we've now completed a large factory in Palm Beach, Florida. That factory is big enough to build enough block to build 7,000 units, either houses or apartments a year. And so we have our first domestic factory done. It's basically completely automated, robotic. We get orders in, produce that block, it gets containerized and shipped out to the site. One of the biggest advantages of this material is the fact that it's so simple to build. You saw those Lego blocks. There's a male and a female, and they all fit together. That 96-unit building only has 22 unique pieces in it. The heaviest piece on that is 80 pounds, so there's no crane involved. So the two of us can go build a house in a day. You can build that in a matter of weeks. We had 11 unskilled workers on that job that had basically never been on a construction site before, and they built the structure in a matter of weeks with no crane. So it's very simple to assemble. The building construction plans that you get are color coded. So say you have a 24-inch block, that might be green, and then you have a 48-inch block, and that's blue. The headers, the joists, the truss, the roof system, the decking system, all color coded. So very simple to build, and as we look forward toward the future with robotics and all that, being able to assemble these becomes very important. One of the
Let me
last
ask you a
thing.
question. I know what I want to build my next house with.
Yeah.
It's going to be this, and I'm a former concrete guy, so compliments, and you won the award in 2024 also for the San Million Resilience. Tell me, what today is the biggest obstacle you face in trying to get to scale? What you've got the Florida approvals.
Building
What is the
codes.
market obstacle that you're seeing?
Market acceptance, right? We've done all the studies. We're fully approved to build anywhere. It's getting those first few people to say, ooh, gosh, I've been using concrete my whole life. Am I going to take this leap of faith and be able to talk to the architect and the engineer and get this approved? And am I going to have a headache? And are they just building to a pro forma, right? That 2 or 3 year plan? Or do you have a 20-year, 50-year vision? Our part of our approval was getting a lot of insurance companies to underwrite this. As we know, concrete has a 40-year lifespan, wood has a 25-year lifespan. They gave us several 100-year lifespan for this product. Because of that, our insurance, back to the ROI of building sustainably, builder's risk was 50% less, and our year-over-year carry costs are 20% less. This is a non-combustible material. Termites don't eat it. Pests, don't affect it. It doesn't mold, rot. Nothing affects it. So that lifespan and these newer composites and materials are going to translate to ROI on projects.
Any other questions? Go
I've got a
ahead.
question.
Tom?
Oh, I'm curious, the ability, have you explored small operations like in economic development zones, for instance, if you have a disaster in an area and you're able to take advantage of the local workforce, train them, lower skilled labor, put in the small operations there, have it become part of the community? Is there that kind of hub and spoke type of system, or is everything coming out of one place currently?
Right now it's coming out of the 2 factories, and one of our business plans is to basically have containers full with pre-designed homes that are basically disaster remediation homes, 1,200, 1,400 square foot homes that have all the basics with your windows, your doors, basic MEPs, a kit of parts that individuals could assemble on their own after a disaster, and getting those containers full that could be sent basically anywhere in the world. So that is definitely part of the business plan. Haven't executed on that quite yet though.
Congratulations. It's
Thank you.
Incredible
Thank
story. You're right. The construction industry is just notoriously slow to adopt and move and evolve. I'm curious, in Palm Beach County, how did it go locally with the building officials and building inspectors to understand what you were doing to get your approvals and get your CO and all those things in the product?
So that's the biggest question we get is, okay, now fine, I want to use Renco, I got to go to my local building code, now what, right? The building official, now what happens? Believe it or not, it was quite seamless. Because we have all the various stamps from Intertech, ICC, all the various building code approvals, once they saw basically the NOAs, they said, great, we can check and talk to the engineers, but if the engineers sign off, we're good to go. So it might have been an extra 4 hours of conversation, right? But it wasn't like 4 weeks
That's
or something of a
encouraging.
delay.
That's surprising.
I was pleasantly surprised, especially in Palm Beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any questions?
No, I'm going to leverage on that, though.
Okay.
I'm in a good spot. I'm surrounded by a client, I'm surrounded by the evil contractor, and
We're ready for you.
The global thinker. If you go to
Yeah.
the next slide, beyond my smiling face. So I'm kind of the devil's advocate, because the hat I wear at Gensler, if you go to the next slide, is I am a practitioner, but I also do research, and my role is to get the best practice case studies, materials into the hands of designers so they don't push back. On the other hand, I teach, and in fact, just this last week, taught load-bearing wall construction to architects looking dazed, because wood, steel, and concrete, load-bearing wall, which of course fireproof. I'm from Houston. Along with hurricanes, we have to focus on both now.
Right.
I've also been involved globally in doing research for the all-steel conglomerate across the world. I'm looking at bamboo, I'm looking at concrete, I'm looking at Turkey, and the seismic issues with load-bearing walls, because that's not the answer if not designed correctly with rebar and other things to keep it. So I've been involved with looking at building technology. So if you go to the next slide, so the role that I've got is to try to get information into our designers' hands to do different, to think about a neighborhood, not a single building. At the same time, my research hat, and this is tough to read, this is an eye chart, we also do annual assessments of what your clients, our clients' clients, the community, what they're worried about. So we've done a series of annual surveys over the last 4 or 5 years saying, are you worried about, yes, we'll use the word climate change or disaster? The bulk of the world, and this is looking at country, and if you go to the next slide, I might have cities, everybody is very wary, very worried. I'm considering moving. I'm not going to invest or raise kids in this city because I'm not sure about its future. This is global. And less than half believe a city is ready for what's coming. So we're actually uncovering all of our consumers' concerns that we should be addressing. And if you're talking about ROI, it's like, well, no one's going to buy a wood frame house in a wildfire area, or, with the roof's going to get lifted off of the next tornado or hurricane. And so we're really assessing globally, as well as, by the way, looking at what makes cities great, what keeps people in downtowns. We're putting it in the context of urban survival, urban thriving. And so this approach to resilience is driven by our customers. And yes, they're concerned about, the city's going to push back, we won't get the new codes, or there's no money to do it. We've also worked extensively, and I'm here with Richard Celine and Roar and the rest of the group, partnering with the insurers. So that's another hat we've got, which is how do we make sure our developer partners, thinking neighborhoods, not just one project, understand the bigger picture. that our research is uncovering and that our design teams, just was on a call this morning with a project, residential project in Eastern Europe. Even there, it's how do we make sure that what gets built can last, to your exact point. We believe, by the way, resource stewardship and resilience go hand in hand, and oh, by the way, it's up to us as designers to think regeneration. How do we repair the mess that we inherited? And, doing the amazing Marshlands in Babcock Branch, great example. Or as a couple of projects I'll tout later today, whether it's public, GSA, or private, doing some work for Hines, the developer up in Jacksonville with the FIS headquarters, every project needs to be resilient, but it has to be part of a resilient neighborhood. I mean, to be alone, the fortress that's left while everything around you burns or floods, we really believe in that integrated approach. So my role is to make sure our teams learn, oh, it worked here. And even introducing something like climate zones. What we face in Houston, even though we get hurricanes, is very different than what Miami and southern Florida face, given where we are relative to Mexico and the Rockies is a very different weather pattern than here. So our role is to try to put all that together in the process that when we start with hopefully a client that gets it, but most of our clients don't, how do we make sure we introduce the entire process to a better outcome from day one? And again, gosh, if we had a contractor aligned with us rather than the normal, we don't do that, we can't warranty it. It's this partnership, learning from the global thinkers. Why are we reinventing the wheel? We should be learning from best practice, which is, of course, our partnership with the university. And we get students coming out that know this stuff and demand it from their, old guys like me, principals who, I don't want to do that. So it's kind of building the bridges. Our role is to find the design bridge building to tie all these amazing people together. I don't think there's another slide. I think we're off to you next. Go to the next slide if you would. Yep. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. We believe to be prepared, it's not just an environmental element, and obviously it's got to be economically smart. This shows some of our strategies we've done. Equity, let's talk reality. This needs to be affordable. This needs to be connected to everybody in the community. This is not, hugging trees. This is making sure the community, the people who work to support everyone else, say the hospitality workers, are taken care of. But we, as architects, really do believe that it's got to be a wonderful place to be. If you're living in a fortification, or I like to sometimes say it's the Game of Thrones syndrome, which is we can build something, seeing the hurricane that wiped out part of Houston 25 years ago when I was an owner. That's my other, bridge building. I actually was an operator owner. We didn't want to restore something, of course, build it like it was made no sense. We didn't want to turn it into something that nobody wanted to be in. The Game of Thrones, which is you have a fortress ready for the dragons, but it's a terrible place to live. And it's really gobbles up resources. Let's make an experience that's a positive element. Babcock Ranch, great example. You can't sell houses if they're built like igloos underground, right? And so you're finding that balance. And that's really what we call climate preparedness.
Let me ask you a question. Let's move on to the question
Sure.
part. I mean, you're part of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, architect engineering company in the world.
Just architecture.
Architecture,
We partner
okay.
with engineers.
Okay. And you talk to thousands of clients every year.
Yeah.
And they come from all different sides. You have the owners that are building their headquarters. That's going to be a signature building.
Mm-hmm.
They're easy to convince. But you also have the speculator, what Tom alluded to, the guy who's just looking 3 years, I'm going to sell it, maybe an institution will buy it. How do you convince those people to go above the codes? Because many will come in and say, I just want to build to code. That's it.
I'll give a shout out. Urban Land Institute, which has brought together the spec developers, all the builders, etc., have really created a very good conversation about this. Whether you're looking at insurability, which, oh, by the way, if you don't have insurance, you don't get a mortgage, but also the investors, whether it's sovereign fund investors or just people who want to invest in something that aren't the first ones, but they'll be the people they'll sell to in 3 years. Someone is going to buy it in 3 years. To get that sold, you have a lot of checklists, and we use the word ESG again. I mean, it has been built in a way that hasn't, used slave labor, blah, blah, blah. But also, is it going to be durable? Is it going to be there? It's an investment for Swedish retired teachers, which, by the way, is a big investor in the U.S. in the second market. They want to know it's going to be there. So if you get them to thinking, who's your next buyer? The whole idea of who's the next user is what makes the difference.
Okay.
And, a big developer that we work with in Jacksonville, the Hines organization based in Houston, are an example. Boston Properties, they do think long-term. Even if they're going to sell it, they still are recognizing they have a responsibility to insure it in even those 3 years and find a seller in the future to the first set of investors. And so this is not a hard conversation. The conversation, however, is, and we'll talk, I guess, more about it, is we can build it smart, but how do we operate it? The reality is the world that operates our buildings is even farther behind than the architecture. The idea of, someone is going to be there to put up the flood logs, the hydrostatic doors, or someone maintains the building so that it has a resilient
It's got to
future.
be idiot-proof to some degree.
I didn't want to go there,
Like to say.
but yes, it's design, construct, and operate.
Yeah.
And that's where we think there makes a difference. Operations need to be part of the conversation.
Let me invite any other questions. You got the engineers and architects. They're
old
the
fire
major
hydrant.
influencers here.
Yeah.
So we're sitting in Miami, one of the most vulnerable cities in the world. How do you rate Miami and what we're doing for resilience? And if you're sort of saying we're strong as the weakest link,
Yeah. So I have a good friend from Australia who said, why are we even living in Miami? We should just be abandoning the place. However, I did have a great colleague, as I mentioned a moment ago, that had worked with a mayor and looking at it will flood. There are parts of South Beach that will be underwater. How do we avoid business interruption? How do we keep working? Now, I don't think we're talking like post-Hurricane Sandy in New York. We've got 8-foot concrete walls around the southern part of Manhattan. I don't think we'll get there, but literally, I think the point you've made, and then clearly with your product, we have to think differently of the materiality. Think Venice. Venice gets wet. Why are we using drywall in places that get wet? It's mold and mildew issue. Why are we building my world, below the floodplain line? What is the floodplain line? Well, FEMA, where should we be? And the project FIS I mentioned, we took the FEMA maps and said, we're going to add more. And in fact, thankfully we did. We added 2 more feet to the protection, and it got to about 1 foot below the 2 feet. FEMA, we would have been underwater. So, we've got to go super above standard. We do have to talk about, all right, is it going to cost more? Back to insurability. Using your product would be a great example of, let's rethink the materiality, maybe not of just the structure, but the interiors.
Everything.
As we see in Texas, if we have a hurricane, we're without power sometimes for 3 weeks because our system is down, et cetera, which means the humidity turns whatever is slightly damp into the mold and mildew world, and that's what destroys most of the houses in Texas, is because the interiors have to be gutted or worse.
Yep.
And so materials, in my mind, is one of the big conversations here in Miami.
I agree.
Any other question for Rives?
Good Andy.
Look at that, just
Made the
on
bell.
time. Well, I like going last. This is great. I love
right.
listening to what you're saying, and I'm fortunate to be able to stand on the shoulders of you giants with this. So, I'm the CEO of BuildSos. A couple of the things that
Speak up a little bit.
maybe just
Yeah,
aim up a
yeah.
little bit. There we go. So, a couple of things that y'all said really resonated with me. You talked, Patrick, about things dying on the vine out here, right? You talked about engagement. You talked about integration. There are lots of different components. And if we can advance the slide by 2. One more. There we go. Okay. So I think a lot of this is framed in terms of integration. There are lots of components to community resilience or preparedness, response, and recovery that are wonderful. They're out there, but as Patrick said, they're dying on the vine. So BuildSos, just as a brief background, we're a little bit different than what y'all have done, a little bit less legacy generational company at this point. But what we did is we started off around 2009, a bunch of contractors in Louisiana who watched storm chasers come in after these recurring events, take advantage of homeowners, take $10,000 deposits from multiple people, and then disappear, right? This is a known issue. And so these guys came together and they said, we should be able to help. So our first product was a physical card for contractors that they're licensed, they're local, they have insurance, and then a PSA to homeowners saying, card your contractor, right? So maybe we can do something. And from there it evolved. In 2016, we looked too broadly, and we looked at the whole wagon wheel of constituents involved in preparedness, response, and recovery. So we looked first at contractors, right, because our board is contractors and architects. Subcontractors, homeowners, of course, are right in the middle of this. Then you have government, you have nonprofits, you have manufacturers, suppliers, and vendors, and insurance, right? So we're talking dozens, if not hundreds of workflows internal to each one of those silos. Never mind when you have disasters that happen or resilience efforts that happen ahead of time, the workflows go across these silos, right? So just think about a claims process. When you have an insurance claim, you have to have information flowing from the homeowner to the contractor, the insurance company, maybe even more broadly. It doesn't matter how good your workflow is in that one silo if it's lost in an email going across, right? So there are fidelity issues here, there are efficiency issues, and the first thing we tried to look at, and again, we tried to boil the ocean, so this is a story about banging our head against the wall and learning the best way to do this, is let's create a system that will integrate everything, right? Well, that's not going to work, it's too much. So what we did is, after trying to bark up that tree for a while, we focused on one thing, the thing we knew best, contractors. So we looked at residential contractors, and long story short, over the last couple of years, we've had this hockey stick of interest where we went from 1,600 residential builders in the United States to 5,100 now over the last 18 months who have put up their hand and said, you know what, I want to be part of this. I want to learn how to be part of this industry. And what we're saying to them is you can build your business and you can build your community at the same time. Because I think with a lot of contractors and with homeowners, you have to meet them where they are, right? So you have to do the with them, what's in it for me.
Yeah.
You can't just say go out there and do good. You have to say, hey, you know what? Interest rates are high. You're not building as many homes right now, but it's $180 billion sitting over here annually for disaster market. Do you want to learn how to access that? So then we started to get a lot of traction, right? And what this slide shows here, this constellation idea, if you think about where we're sitting, and if you think about all of these individual booths, and the amount of person hours and effort and innovation that went into all these guys are here shaking hands trying to get out there, right? And there's brilliance in each one of these little stars. But what it takes, and I think this is what you were saying a little while ago, it takes the bigger picture.
That's right.
It takes storytelling. I mean,
Thank you.
humans we've evolved to tell stories, right? That's been our major superpower. So what BuildSos is trying to do is tell you about the constellation with the stars. Yes, you have building these massive communities is great. You have new building materials, right? You guys are fighting the good fight. You have educational components, right? Massive players, you have little players. But how much further can we get if we can tell a story, if we can point out this is Cassiopeia, right? It's not just a bunch of little stars. So that's what we're trying to do in BuildSos, and you see the way we're doing it is you see these stars on the outside, they're all players, and then you see the partners. We have different types of partners we try to engage with, and we try to bring them together, identify the best, and promote them. I will show one thing, if I may, just real quick.
Quick, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Okay. Can we advance the slide? I think there's a video. I don't know if it's going to play.
I don't think we're going to be able to show the whole
Okay.
video.
I'll let it play in the
I
background.
went to your site,
Yeah.
knowing that we're going to be here together. I went to your site and I test drove the, whatever you call it, the game.
Yeah, resilience.
And it had 33 questions,
Right.
I think. Only one of those questions related to what I should do in advance for resilience.
Prepare.
And I was kind of disappointed, personally, because I'm a resilience guy. I said, is that endemic of our kind of, mindset still, that we focus so much on the SOS, let's say, when the ship is already sinking?
Right.
Rather than how do we make the ship stronger so we don't have to send out an SOS? So, I saw also, okay, there was a build
Yeah.
back better, but, out of 33 questions, I'd like to see more emphasis on the
Preparedness.
what people should do to become resilient and not have to SOS.
Yes.
So
that's a great
that's kind of my
point.
challenge to you.
Yes.
Can
And if we
move in that
advance,
direction?
and let this play in the background, I guess it's not
Yeah.
there. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that's a UX problem that I need to work with, because the game actually has 3 journeys: prepare, respond, and recover. And prepare, which is the pre-SOS, is I think 13 or 14 different missions. So if you couldn't find them, that's on me to go figure out why you couldn't find them.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
But there are 13, and the idea behind the game, just briefly, is that just like it's tax season now, we all know April 15th is coming up, and everybody sitting in this audience has different times when they wake up and say, okay, today's the day I have to get on my taxes. It's the same with disasters, except there is no April 15th, it's just all of a sudden
Every day.
the fires over the hill, the storms in the Gulf. So what we did with the resilience game is we created a game to engage people using social media techniques, little dopamine hits, Duolingo if you use this type of thing, and let's have an engaging, fun experience that we can bring people through this otherwise, honestly, kind of boring process and this sea of information, right? To have them walk through and end up at the end of the day with, I have my insurance policy on my phone. I have my asset list on my phone. I've got a video of, of all the assets in my house. So you have, at the end of this, you have people who are prepared almost in spite of themselves through the game. And I'm hoping, to answer your question,
More resilience.
that's going to
Less
prepare them
SOS.
for when the
Yeah.
disaster happens.
Go ahead.
So I'm intrigued. Thank you for bringing up. It's all the story.
Yeah.
And that's how it works with the clients, which is walk us through, and you become the trusted advisor because you're walking in their footsteps. You're walking in their shoes.
Right.
You're not saying I know better. Blah blah blah. Let's work together. What's your background? How did you come to this?
Oh, gee, I don't know how far back
In 1
you go.
second or less, right?
It's very, very eclectic. I was a high school math and science teacher for a while.
Okay.
I worked in finance for a while. I worked for an energy guy down south for a while. It's kind of like a Shark Tank type of guy. I went to business school. I lived in Belgium for a while. I got a master's in leadership and wrote a book on
Okay,
leadership.
there you
I worked at UCSF in clinical systems through COVID in the School of Dentistry. Up until 3 years ago, this disaster thing was not on my radar. But what I think it is, and I've told this to my wife before, is that when I get to the place where I'm doing what I should be doing, the entire eclectic history is going to make sense. And that's where this is.
Sounds like it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So in 10 years from now, what's the home of the future look like? What's the city of the future look like? Where is that city? Is there a place, a region, a design, a material, an energy that you think we're all trending toward with all the information and data points that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can't even presume to guess at the pace that things are changing right now what that's going to look like. But what my goal would be, my brass ring, is that whatever that is, homeowners are aware of what their options are. Contractors are aware of what's out there, and they can get to it easily, and they know what's spec'd. For instance, Fortified, right? We talked about Smart Home America.
Yeah.
So Smart Home is doing amazing things in this space, Fortified with IBHS, but there are still issues. If you're a contractor building Fortified, you have to go find the product yourself.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Home Depot have a pre-selected
Yeah,
basket
exactly.
there, right?
Exactly.
So in the future, what I'm hoping is, if we can build the superstructure, the framework on which to hang whatever the technologies are going to be, then that home, that community of the future is going to employ the highest and best of what's out there because people know about it, they've chosen it, it's incentivized with insurance.
And once again, it's the community. I mean, why be
And
the last
contractors
one
making
left?
money.
It's got to be
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like
And Patrick,
Babcock
that's a great question. We think about that a lot, and I think, kind of like Aris trying to simplify the sustainability and two-sided coin, if you were to throw everybody's opinions in this building together as to what's important to them, there's going to be 1,000 different things, but they kind of fall under the blanket of peace of mind. And I think those communities that can figure out how do we deliver peace of mind to our homeowners, and in a way that's convenient. How do I combine peace of mind with convenience? And then the challenge is going to be the price point. How do I do it at a price point that makes sense, which is kind of what you're doing, right? You can bring higher quality product, higher quality experience. Typically, people will pay more to stay at a Four Seasons than they will at a Courtyard Marriott, right? Because it's a higher quality experience. But the magic in how do I give you a higher quality experience at the same cost or a parity? And we've seen that across technology happening with something as simple as, not as simple, but something like fiber, where that fiber experience is better than the coaxial cable experience. It's actually cheaper. It's like a higher quality experience at a lower cost. So the folks in the room who can figure out how to converge technology, innovation, to deliver, in our opinion, that quality of life, that peace of mind everyone's looking for. And that's a bunch of different things. That's resilience, that's education, that's healthcare, it's insurance, whatever those things are. But under that blanket of peace of mind, who are the stakeholders in this power of partnership, the team sport? Who's in that room to bring that peace of mind to the overall population base? To us, that's the key to it.
And in some of our surveys, when we said, so what makes a good house, or et cetera, is, people who own a house, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, whatever, they don't know what it takes to maintain that house. They're not the experts in facility operations like I spent 10 years doing. Like, how do I make sure my roof stays on, or how often do I replace my roof? So it's like you move into a house and you have a manual for your oven, but you don't have a manual for the house, unless perhaps you're lucky to move into a community like you've got. So it's like, I think the peace of mind is my most important investment. How do I take care of it? And this is where you think the insurers would be real helpful, and some are and some aren't. That partnership with the long-term, I've been in my house 25 years and I'm now finally moving. I've got neighbors who have been in the house 1 year and they're moving. So this idea of, to your good point of the long lastingness of the
Yeah.
biggest investment, learning about the community, knowing your neighbors, so you can, when we have hurricanes, no power, the trees come down, we're all out there helping each other. It's the community that
Right.
makes the house even more valuable. But it's like understanding just how to exist in this era. I grew up in, for 30 years, never thought about this at all. And all of a sudden, living in Houston in the 90s, this is now what I have to face. Wildfire, floods, plague, pestilence, hurricanes, etc.
Yeah, and I'd add to that too, in the ecosystem you just described, let's lower the threshold and let's grease the skids so that the process you went through with your massive, multi-generational, successful company, it was incredible to get that across the finish line. I can't imagine the resources it took to get it. So what happens to the little players when they have something innovative, right? How do we lower the barrier or expedite the process for them to get integrated into your homes, right?
Are you
that you're
seeing
building?
any governments, local, state, federal, that are taking the lead, that are giving more incentives for greener, better, more sustainable building materials, product systems,
Yeah.
Babcock ranches of the
You
world?
remember me talking about hitting my head against the wall?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of good effort out there, a lot of great intentions, but I tend to, maybe it's business school background, I tend to look at the market more because I think that if there are small products that we can get out there, we can connect to, we can put them in Home Depot, for instance, we can educate homeowners about them, educate contractors, then let the market lead that, and then I think a lot of the regulatory bodies afterwards, I mean, of course, I wouldn't advocate something that's not in code, but then people start to take notice, oh, look at what's happening, right? Maybe we should integrate this into, so that's the path at least that I'm
Okay, we've
trying.
already moved into kind of the roundtable discussion, which is great. Let me ask you all, what is, you think, the positive role that insurance can play? I mean, a lot of insurance in states is under crisis. The insurance company saying we can't price, they won't let us price it properly. The, governments are saying, well, they can't afford to pay you that. But insurance is a clear indicator of risk and helps decision making,
Thank you, Richard.
So what is the role? And what is the role, on top of that, of consumer education?
There you go.
So I open that for any thoughts from you.
So I'll jump in real quick and start it. So I've been part of an organization called 10 Across, 10X. They had a conference late last year in Jacksonville. And that was precisely the question. Why isn't the insurance, how should we talk better? We sure learned a lot. At the moment, one size fits all. Insurers don't do due diligence. They want to throw a one size fits all approach. We're going to move shortly to a curated or otherwise insurance world. That is, you'll have a lot of due diligence to get insurance with what's unique to your piece of property. Now, if you own a portfolio like many of our clients, they bet on the larger whatever. If you have all of your property in South Florida, you're in trouble. But if you got property all over, they'll kind of amortize or average it. Because let's be blunt, it's a business that has to make a profit, and it's a business like every business that wants to take the path of least resistance. Like, imagine a multi-week analysis of somebody's 2,000 square foot house to really insure it right is not happening, but it does have to happen in the future. And by the way, the insurance that's got the biggest draw is not the destruction of property. It's not the destruction of your car. The biggest insurance challenge is business interruption. That's now a big deal, which is, I've got my house, it's fine, but everything around me has been underwater, or the schools aren't back, I can't go to work, sorry boss, and that business. And in Texas, we have the industries are small enough that 5 days of no business in Texas, that's bankruptcy. And so just not having the ability to get to work, or the power's not there, or whatever it may be, destroys businesses. That's the bigger, we worry about our house, but if I don't have a job, I'm stuck. And so it's a very complicated insurance world. Again, we've got to think about communities and
We've
The
spent
other
more time on this topic in the last 2 years than we spent in the prior 10.
Yeah.
And like all relationships, it's a two-way street. I think we can do a better job as developers and as builders to educate the insurance industry on what we're doing. And the insurance companies, it's almost like Patrick's comment on the construction. That industry is broken as well, right? It's a very backward-looking industry. Everything looks backwards, and what happened before, and then actuarially, that data determines kind of the risk going forward, which by definition can't take into account innovation, because innovation's new, right? So you can't look back and say what happened 5, 7, 8 years ago, and that technology didn't exist. How do I underwrite that? And so they don't really have the proper system in place to underwrite risk. They're not underwriting risk properly. We're frustrated at Babcock. We feel like we've really significantly de-risked that resilience story we're talking about, yet we're priced very similar to our neighbors on the street who haven't done any of the things we've done. So we've gotten really engaged with insurance companies. We've been spending a lot of time educating them what we've done. We're close to being able to announce a pilot program with an insurance company that's going to come in and do 500 homes at Babcock with a very different insurance program, better coverage, lower premiums, as a test pilot, just to validate some of that, because they're going to take some risk without having the actual historical data, because a lot of the stuff we've done is new. And so I think it's back to this team sport, convening, educating, holding hands, and understanding we have a role to play. It's a lot easier for an insurance company to write a car than a house.
Yeah.
Car's got a VIN number, they can type in the VIN number, they can know every single nook and cranny of that car and underwrite the risk of that car, who the driver is, right, age, demographics, et cetera. On a house,
Everything's
newly
new.
built home, we haven't done a great job of creating visibility into that home or that community for the insurance companies to underwrite. So we've got to do a better job of bringing that data forward and making it more visible.
I'd like to add on that too, if I may, just quickly. So when I think insurance, I think actuaries. When I think actuaries, I think data. And when I think data these days, I think AI, right? For what it's really supposed to be used for, not for hallucinating something, but for actually taking large data sets and making meaning. So I think I would agree that it is a two-way street, and the construction industry needs to collect this data in a meaningful way through, again, look at these systems that are out here. They can collect real data, high quality data, and if that data, if we knew in a house, in an address, all the different components to put it together, and we're able to get that data and work with the insurance company, they have we're making their job easier, right? And then if you combine that with the fact that over the past 2-3 years, you have insurers leaving markets because it's not sustainable as a business anymore, they're incentivized, I would guess,
Yeah.
to want to stay in that market or get back in.
So let me, real quick,
Let
let
me
add
ask
something
Patrick
history,
to
though.
come in,
Yeah.
you know, because you haven't,
I think everything's been touched on. It is important. I think just another component to it, with a rapidly changing environment, is some form of national catastrophic fund, because these disasters are happening more frequently, more sporadically, in places we wouldn't expect. So I think reinsurance is going to have to be almost rewritten. I'm also starting to see a lot more people self-insuring,
Yes.
and looking at what they can do themselves because of the frustration that it sounds like you've seen, where you know you're going above and beyond, and no one's underwriting it to what you would see. With our company, with Renco, we know it's a superior product. We know it doesn't rust, it doesn't rot, it's not combustible, et cetera. And it's been way harder than we would imagine after 10 years of testing to prove the insurance company that we should get a better rate. So people are going to start self-insuring. Insurance isn't keeping up for sure. It's about to change because of AI with the data that's available. So I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be a very different market. I would imagine there's going to be new insurance companies that pop up that we've never heard of today that disrupt the antiquated ones.
Final comment, yeah.
A wee bit of history. If you know, years ago, before we had GIS and all this fancy stuff, when we were trying to understand as students or as architects a neighborhood, we'd first go to the Sanborn maps. Sanborn maps. These were created after the fire in Chicago.
Yeah. I've seen some of those maps,
To
yeah.
basically
They're really good.
identify
Yeah.
per property, per building, what and how it was built. And by the way, it was measured drawing. So literally you could decide how big the building was, and realtors used to use it to determine not only how big it was, but what it was built of. Because at that point, the insurance world's biggest and only concern was fire. This is United States, turn of the 20th century, the 1900s to 2000, or not 2000, 1900s to the 20th century. The only thing the insurers worried about was fire. And therefore, as an industry, they all collectively supported this research group led by Dr. Sanborn, that every city of size had maps that described to the detail, and what drove, of course, modern codes, is what the building was made of to be resistant to fire. Now, this is before we had AI or any fancy technology. Why is it so hard for the
They
American...
knew the properties then, now they just look at data and statistics,
So why is it so hard for the industry
It's
now
not.
to look at now what is our reality, to your point, multiple challenges at the same time? We lose power from a hurricane, and now we're prone to fire. I mean, the fact is insurers aren't recognizing the interconnected nature of resilience now. It's no longer just one, it's everything happens at once.
Well, we want to leave a few minutes for questions from the audience. It's been a good roundtable, and each of the participants will get a complimentary copy of my book, Resilionomics, which addresses a lot of these
That's
and
it.
asks
Book.
more questions than answers. But I'd like to ask the audience, if you have questions, to do 4 things. First, give us your name, your company, who you want to ask the question to, if it's an individual, or the whole audience,
Do they have to
and
yell?
ask the question. I don't want any speeches. So, sir, go ahead.
project.
Do we have a mic? No.
Joe Mistage, I was one of the founders of BuildSos, but the question I have for you
I'll
is,
repeat it.
it's interesting to me that APA has not been mentioned one time
Okay.
in this grouping.
Sure.
And going back to your situation, how do we get them better engaged in zoning and planning based on environment and topo and not economic stresses?
So I'm going to repeat it, Brooke. So
Yeah,
the
please.
question is, it's back to professional organizations, the American Planning Association, APA, who's, concerned with a larger approach than a single property or, et cetera, is looking at the entire community. Part of the challenges is for APA and the discussion we've had here is, I didn't mention a professional organization because they're beholden to the location, right? The APA has chapters, and if they're in Texas, they'll focus on Texas. I will admit, I work closely with many planners. What we've talked about today is very much in their heart, but the relationship of, codes, zoning regulations, design guidelines is worth probably another hour and a half or two, which is how fast those changes. If you think codes, material changes are slow, codes, zoning are even more complicated. To your good point, it's old-fashioned technology applied to a modern problem, which is planning and how do we plan and what's the measure of success in planning, et cetera.
I once said that the most frustrating job in the country is to be an urban planner.
Yes.
Let's get someone else asking
We'll
questions.
talk later.
Yes, sir. Name, company,
I'm
question.
Richard Sealine with Future Proofing
Uh-oh.
America. Let me emphasize something that you raised earlier. And I believe that there's empirical data that's out there to prove what you're talking about and what Tom and Babcock. So 20% of the 3 major southern counties in Alabama adopted the Fortified Homes program.
Yes.
20% adopted it. As a result, the entire state of Alabama home insurance rates have begun to go down. So it's proving to the insurance industry, but as our good friend Rives said, if you do it a handful here and a handful there, that's not what insurance wants. It's
Yeah.
what reinsurance wants, which is massive amount of development that ties to a fortified type of solution
Right.
that a designer can build into the solution. So the we're now getting more examples.
So do you have a question for
Well,
No,
anyone?
I don't.
No,
Okay.
I've got an answer
Thank you.
for his
That's
non-question.
a good point,
No,
yeah.
I've got a quick answer. I think that's a good point. So one of the things, I'm glad you brought up Fortified, is that Fortified is a wonderful program, right? Starting, with Alabama first, but there are tens of millions of dollars being thrown at it by communities, and now it's spreading nationwide. So one of the things that BuildSos did, as an example of trying to look at the ecosystem, is you can have the building system, you can have the grant funds, you can have the homeowners who said, I want the grant funds. And at the end of the day, it relies on a contractor in his F-250 with some guys on the roof to actually put it in place. So when you look at that whole, no shade on them at all, because it's amazing what they're doing, but when you look at that entire process, the weak link is the contractor and the evaluator 2 hours away maybe, who, it's an inefficient process. So we built something called FortiGuide, which is a baby step-by-step, simple app where you can be walked through and you can take pictures, and now my evaluator I don't have to wait a week for them to drive out because we can look at it here. It's those type of micro
Simplification.
tech solutions in the overall ecosystem, which I hope will expedite the macro.
Let's get one
Yeah.
more question. I think there was a question from here. Go ahead.
Not hearing.
I think my question was sort of similar to our research was looking at parks and vulnerable groups who are often subjected to higher insurance rates. So how is the idea of affordability linked to vulnerability groups? So is affordability a component that you can insurance or these type of grants?
So mobile homes, manufactured maybe homes, modular homes, that's kind of, this topic. Any thoughts on that between resilience
Yeah.
and affordability?
Go ahead.
balance?
So again, being in
Yeah.
Texas, it's probably second only to, well, nowhere in terms of making modular. everything from the old Aramco, oil and gas in Saudi, to the military. Whether that, and you can see some of it here, whether that becomes a way to respond, or, to your point, upgrading the standards for modular homes. I'm not talking about trailers, I'm talking about prefabricated. We're seeing a real advantage to that in some of the tests that's been done at Southwest Texas testing and so forth. The modular approach has some real advantage for particularly the affordable housing on the coast. So it is an advantage, but the problem is, just like every contractor, it costs more. Can they sell it more? Is the market there? Do people value it? Long story short, yes, that's probably where the future should be. When we ask what's the 20-year window, we're going to see a lot more modular approach for what's on the edge.
From a construction standpoint, I'd say the future of construction is going much more to a prefabricated environment in a warehouse in a big room like this, where panels, where building systems are pre-assembled and installed on site, whether that's a bathroom, a kitchen, a laundry room, a wall system. That's the future of construction, in my opinion.
And the question is, how far down do you go? A module like the Lego brick, which you can be a little bit more flexible, or do you literally do the size of a tractor trailer truck, lift it like the old tech build house from Massachusetts? You build it, assemble it, and plump them down, and you're done in a matter of a day. That's the big debate.
And I think, too, you had mentioned affordability, right? That was one of your questions.
Yeah.
I think that absolutely things are moving in that direction. But since the lifespan of, so one of the things I did 100 years ago was I worked in floor plan financing for manufactured homes. So when you have 20 years ago what a manufactured home was, that's not going to last that long. Even the FEMA trailers that they would give you 10 years ago, 5 years ago,
Wouldn't last 5
it's not going to
years.
last long.
Yeah.
But if you take some of these panelized systems now, especially the ones that are using innovative inputs, like small diameter trees, that you can partner with California and you can clear out for wildfires and do home hardening, but then that becomes an input for a panelized system, and that panelized system is going to last 20 times as long. I think that the affordability comes in when you have the financial systems understand that it's a different model. And because if you can extend the payments on something like that and build it into a financial model and have it supported by insurance and by banks, then all of a sudden your payment is half of what it was, and you've got something that lasts much longer.
Well, thank you. I think we've come to the end of this roundtable. It's been crisp and dynamic and interesting. I want to thank the panelists and also the audience. Give a round of applause. And everyone will get one of my books, as I promised, and we'll have a group photo.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
With the book.
It's like Oprah, you get a card.